As my name is Maya, I am 30 years old, and for most of my life I learned how to be quiet without anyone asking me to be. Silence became a skill I mastered early: how to sit still, how to nod, how to not take up space. I didn't learn it from strangers or teachers. I learned it at home. It was a warm July evening when I pulled into my parents' driveway for the first time in years. The house looked exactly the same, like time had politely avoided it. The white paint near the porch was still peeling in thin curls. The wind chimes were still clinking softly in that uneven rhythm I remembered from childhood, but something inside me had shifted. I felt older in a way birthdays don't give you, tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Wiser in the quiet, painful way life teaches you when you're not the favorite. Mom rushed out the moment my car door shut, her arms wide, squeezing me too tight when she hugged me, like she was trying to make up for something she couldn't quite name. Her perfume was the same floral scent she'd worn my entire life. Dad followed a few seconds later, giving me a quick, awkward pat on the back like he always did, already glancing past me toward the house. The routine hadn't changed. It never did. "Dinner's almost ready," Mom said brightly, stepping back and brushing invisible lint from my shoulder. "And guess who's coming over?" I didn't need to ask. My stomach already tightened. Jennifer, my older sister, the golden child. Jennifer had always been everything I wasn't: loud without being called annoying, confident without being called arrogant, praised for traits I was told to tone down or grow into. She was 5 years older, but in my parents' eyes, that gap might as well have been a lifetime of proof that she was destined for more. When Jennifer walked into a room, attention followed her like gravity. Conversations shifted, faces lit up. When I walked in, I became furniture, useful, present, easily ignored. By the time dinner was served, the table was set with Mom's special occasion tablecloth, the one with the delicate lace trim that only ever came out when Jennifer was involved. I noticed it the way I always did, quietly, filing it away with all the other little signs I was never supposed to notice. Halfway through the meal, Jennifer set down her fork with dramatic timing and casually announced a family trip to Hawaii, Christmas, flights, resorts, beaches, like it was nothing more than suggesting dessert. Mom clapped her hands together, eyes lighting up like a kid on Christmas morning. Dad smiled wide, pride written all over his face, like Jennifer had just personally cured cancer. Then Jennifer turned to me, lips curling into that familiar half-smirk I'd known my entire life. "Maya, do you think you can afford it?" she asked sweetly. "Or should big sister spot you?" Heat rushed to my face, my chest tightened. Every instinct told me to shrink, to laugh it off, to let her win the moment. Instead, I forced a smile that felt stiff and unnatural. "I'll handle my own expenses," I said evenly. $3,000. That was the number she said next. More than my savings, more than my comfort, more than I should have agreed to, but I nodded anyway, because saying no had always turned me into the problem. Saying no meant I was difficult, dramatic, selfish. I'd learned early that peace in my family came at the cost of myself. Growing up, it was always like this. Jennifer's achievements filled the house like trophies that never gathered dust. Her wins were framed, talked about, remembered years later like family legends. Mine were acknowledged briefly, if at all, before the conversation drifted back to her. I don't think my parents meant to be cruel. That almost made it worse. They didn't tear me down, they simply forgot I was there. The only person who ever truly saw me was my Grandpa Joe. He lived in an old house on Maple Street with a wraparound porch and a swing that creaked like it was telling secrets to anyone willing to listen. That house smelled like old books, fresh coffee, and summer air. He taught me chess, even when I lost every game at first. He took me fishing on quiet mornings when the lake was smooth as glass. He taught me patience without lectures, strength without noise. He used to say the quiet ones often carried the deepest strength, that the loudest splash didn't always mean the biggest catch. Sitting beside him, listening to old movies hum in the background or watching sunlight dance on the water, I felt something I never felt anywhere else. Seen, not compared. Not measured, just accepted. When he died during my freshman year of college, something inside me cracked open. The phone call from Mom came early in the morning. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but I barely heard the words. The world felt unreal, like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. At the will reading, we sat in a quiet office that smelled faintly of paper and dust. Jennifer sat straight-backed in her expensive black dress. My parents held hands, names were read, numbers followed. Jennifer received money. My parents received money, heads nodded, smiles flickered. Then the attorney looked at me. And to my granddaughter Maya, he said, I leave my house on Maple Street, including all its contents and surrounding property. For a moment the room was silent, then Jennifer laughed, not kindly, not softly. The old house, she said, shaking her head. Wow. They called it old, useless, a burden. They joked about creaky floors and outdated furniture, but I felt something entirely different. I felt like Grandpa had reached across time and placed something sacred in my hands, a reminder, a promise. Proof that someone believed I was worth leaving something meaningful behind. I just didn't know yet how much it would cost me to keep it after the funeral. Life rushed forward like nothing had happened, like grief was an inconvenience everyone politely stepped around. There was no pause, no space to breathe, no acknowledgement that something important had been lost. Jennifer dove straight into wedding planning, and within months, she was walking down the aisle in a ceremony that felt more like a glossy magazine spread than a marriage. White doves were released into the sky on cue. Crystal glasses clinked under soft lighting. A 5-tier cake stood perfectly centered like a work of art. Guests whispered about how beautiful everything was, how lucky Jennifer was, how proud my parents must be. Mom cried happy tears the entire day. Dad stood tall, chest out, like this wedding was proof he'd done everything right as a father. I stood to the side in a bridesmaid dress Jennifer had chosen, smiling when expected, clapping on cue, feeling like a background extra in someone else's movie. After the honeymoon tan barely faded, Jennifer and her husband Tom opened their restaurant. They talked about it nonstop, and so did my parents. It wasn't just a business to them, it was a miracle. Framed newspaper articles went up in the living room. Proud smiles followed every mention of the restaurant's name. Mom told neighbors. Dad brought it up at every family gathering. Praise poured out endlessly, like success was contagious if spoken about enough. Meanwhile, I was left quietly trying to figure out how to manage Grandpa's house while still juggling college life. Property taxes arrived like clockwork. Maintenance costs stacked up. Roof repairs, plumbing issues, utilities, none of it was glamorous, none of it made headlines or earned applause. It was just responsibility, and it landed squarely on my shoulders. After weeks of stress and running numbers late at night, I finally thought I'd found a reasonable solution. At a family dinner, between bites of overcooked chicken and forced small talk, I suggested renting the house out. Just temporarily, I explained. Enough to cover the costs while I finished school. The room went quiet in that way that immediately told me I'd said the wrong thing. Mom and Jennifer exchanged a look. The one that always came right before a decision was made without me. Why would you rent to strangers? Mom said gently, her voice carrying that soft disappointment she reserved for me. When your sister needs a place. I blinked, confused, my heart starting to race. Jennifer nodded along like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You're not going to charge us rent, right? She added casually. That would be weird. And just like that, my house stopped being mine. There was no discussion, no consideration, no pause to ask how I felt or what I needed. The decision was made for me as usual. I swallowed it, like always. I told myself this was what family did. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it didn't matter. They moved in quickly. Too quickly. Grandpa's old leather chair disappeared, replaced with something modern and cold. His fishing photos were taken down and replaced with framed reviews of their restaurant. The house started to look unfamiliar, like it had been stripped of its soul. Every time I came home on break, I had to ask permission to visit what was legally my own property. Jennifer spoke about changes they were making like she was doing me a favor. Tom barely acknowledged me at all. Then came Hawaii, the trip Jennifer had announced so casually like it was a given. I worked nonstop, early mornings at my campus job, late nights picking up extra shifts. I skipped outings, ate cheap meals, said no to everything that cost money. Every dollar went into savings. I reminded myself it would be worth it, that for once I'd be included. When Jennifer called and told me to send my share, I didn't hesitate. $3,000 vanished with one tap on my phone. I stared at the confirmation screen longer than I should have, my hands shaking, a mix of fear and pride settling in my chest. I bought a cheap swimsuit on sale, nothing fancy, just something blue that fit. My friend lent me her suitcase, the good one with wheels that actually worked. I was proud of myself, proud that I'd done this on my own, proud that I hadn't asked for help. Then, 2 days before Christmas, Jennifer announced I wouldn't be going. She said it casually, like she was canceling lunch plans. "Restaurant issues," she explained, her tone smooth and rehearsed. "We decided you should sit this one out." The words didn't make sense at first. My brain lagged behind my ears, my money stayed, my seat disappeared. Mom told me to be understanding. She said family helps family. Dad didn't say anything at all. He just stared at his plate, avoiding my eyes like silence could excuse him. Someone had to watch the house while they were gone, Mom added, like she was solving a logistical problem, not breaking her daughter's heart. That night, I lay in my childhood bed staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars Grandpa had helped me stick to the ceiling years ago. They still glowed faintly, stubbornly, even after all this time. I felt something inside me shift, slow and deliberate. For the first time, I didn't feel small or confused or desperate for approval. I felt clear, calm, resolved. I made a decision I'd never made before. I stopped being invisible. I smiled the next morning, the kind of smile that looks calm on the outside but is built on something solid and final. I hugged everyone goodbye, letting Mom squeeze me a little too tight, letting Dad pat my shoulder like everything was normal. I waved as the taxis pulled away, Jennifer adjusting her sunglasses, already halfway mentally to the beach, already sure she'd won again. The moment they disappeared down the street, my smile faded, not into sadness but into focus. I got into my car and drove straight to my house, the one on Maple Street, the one Grandpa left to me, the one that had stopped feeling like mine the moment I let myself be quiet again. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, and for a second I just stood there, taking it all in. The air felt wrong. Too polished, too staged. Grandpa's presence was almost completely erased. That was when I started moving. I didn't cry, I didn't hesitate. I went room by room, packing everything that wasn't mine. Jennifer's designer clothes came off the hangers one by one, folded and placed into boxes without care or anger, just efficiency. Tom's custom suits, expensive shoes, gadgets, paperwork, all of it went in. I found their important documents tucked away in Grandpa's old study, sitting where his chessboard used to be, and packed those too. It felt strange how calm I was, like my body already knew this was overdue. I hired movers on Christmas Eve, paid the holiday rate without blinking, signed the forms with a steady hand. Worth every penny. Watching them carry box after box out of the house felt less like revenge and more like reclaiming oxygen after years of holding my breath. Once the house was empty of them, I called a locksmith. He showed up annoyed but professional, changed every single lock while I watched. Front door, back door, garage, I tested each key myself. When it was done, I stood alone in the living room, the silence thick but clean, then I left. While they posted beach photos and champagne glasses, my phone stayed quiet. I let it stay quiet. I didn't check messages, I didn't scroll. I didn't flinch at the thought of them laughing with my money. I went back to campus, sat with friends, ate bad food, slept deeply. It wasn't until New Year's Day that my phone exploded. Missed calls stacked on top of each other, messages pouring in so fast the screen lagged. "Where's our stuff? Why don't the keys work? What did you do?" I read them slowly, one by one, feeling something unexpected rise in me. Relief. I didn't answer, not yet. I let the panic build on their end the way it had built in my chest for years. When I finally picked up the phone, Mom's voice was already screaming before I could say hello. Dad's voice followed, demanding explanations. Jennifer's messages turned sharp, accusing, dramatic, like she was the victim of some grand betrayal. I stayed calm. My voice didn't shake, my heart didn't race. "You took my money," I said evenly. "You took my house, you took my silence for years, I'm done." There was stunned quiet on the line, like they weren't prepared for me to speak like that. They tried guilt next. Family helps family. How could I do this to my own sister? They tried threats, lawyers, consequences. They tried loyalty, reminding me of everything they'd supposedly done for me. I listened without interrupting. Then I told them the truth. The house was being rented, paying tenants, real ones. A lease was already in progress. The house was no longer available as their backup plan. There was nothing left to discuss. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't argue. I didn't apologize. I hung up. After that, the messages came faster, angrier, more desperate, ungrateful, selfish, heartless, words that would have crushed me once. Now they felt distant, like noise from another room. I turned my phone face down and went to bed. For the first time in my life, I slept peacefully, not the shallow sleep of exhaustion, but deep, uninterrupted rest. No knots in my stomach, no rehearsed explanations running through my head, no fear of disappointing anyone, just quiet, real quiet. That was a year ago, and time didn't heal everything the way people like to say it does, but it did give me distance, and distance gave me clarity. I'm finishing my senior year now, walking across campus with a confidence I never had before, not because life suddenly became easy, but because I finally stopped bending myself into shapes that fit other people. The house is rented now, legally and properly, with tenants who pay on time and treat it with respect. The income is steady, predictable, boring in the best way possible. It covers the taxes, the maintenance, and still leaves enough for savings. I'm careful with that money, careful in a way that comes from knowing how hard it is to earn and how easy it is to lose when you trust the wrong people. Sometimes when I check the account balance, I think about Grandpa sitting at his kitchen table, coffee in hand, quietly proud without ever making a big show of it. I know he would approve of how I'm handling things, of the patience, of the restraint, of the fact that I didn't burn everything down just to prove a point. Jennifer's restaurant didn't last. It failed slowly at first, then all at once, like something hollow finally collapsing under its own weight. She and Tom moved back in with my parents, regrouping, rebranding, planning whatever comes next. I don't hear it directly from them. I hear it through distant relatives, through casual mentions, through secondhand updates that feel strangely distant, like they're about characters in a story I used to be part of but no longer am. I don't comment, I don't ask questions, I don't offer advice. Not because I'm bitter, but because I've learned that involvement always came with a cost I was expected to pay alone. Sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet and my thoughts get louder, I wonder if we'll ever reconcile. I wonder if my parents will ever really understand why I did what I did, if they'll ever see the years of quiet hurt they dismissed as sensitivity or imagination. I wonder if Jennifer will ever look at me and see an equal instead of a convenience, someone to lean on when things fall apart and ignore when they're going well. I wonder if my dad will ever speak up for me the way he always spoke up for her, if my mom will ever stop defending the imbalance as love. Those questions still exist, but they don't control me anymore. Because every time doubt starts to creep in, every time guilt tries to settle into my chest, I remember Hawaii. I remember the champagne glasses raised in celebration. I remember the photos, perfectly filtered, carefully captioned, paid for with my savings. I remember sitting alone while they laughed on beaches, knowing my money made it possible, knowing my absence didn't matter enough to stop them. And that memory doesn't hurt the way it used to. It grounds me. It reminds me why I drew the line where I did. I realize now that approval was never something they were going to give freely. Apologies were never coming. Understanding was always conditional, dependent on how useful I made myself. I spent years trying to earn a place that was never really offered. What I needed wasn't their permission to exist or their recognition of my worth. What I needed was to choose myself without waiting for anyone else to choose me first. I don't need their approval. I don't need their apology. I don't need to be invited back into a dynamic that required my silence as the price of belonging. What I finally have is self-respect, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that shows up in quiet decisions and firm boundaries, the kind that lets me sleep at night without replaying conversations or rehearsing explanations. It's not loud. It's not dramatic, it's steady. And that's something no one can ever take from me again.